All right, so today we are diving into a concept that has had philosophers scratching their heads for centuries. Cosmopolitanism.
Okay.
You've probably heard the word, but today we're going way deeper
Okay.
than just, liking different kinds of food or whatever.
Right.
We're talking about the idea of being a citizen of the world.
Interesting.
So what's fascinating here is that this idea, while sounding modern, actually goes all the way back to ancient Greece,
That's right. Yeah.
which seems kind of ironic, right?
Yeah.
The Greeks were all about their individual city-states always fighting with each other. You'd think world citizen would be the last thing on their minds.
Well, that's a good point. And you know what's so funny is that one of the earliest examples is Diogenes the Cynic.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of him. Wasn't he the barrel guy?
Yeah, he's the barrel guy. You know how some folks get really into minimalism these days?
Oh, yeah. Big time.
He was like the ultimate minimalist. He believed in rejecting all societal norms and living in accordance with nature.
Interesting.
He even lived in a barrel.
Wait, a barrel? Like a literal wooden barrel?
Yes, you heard right. No rent to pay, I guess.
That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah. When asked where he came from, his answer was, I am a citizen of the world.
Oh, wow. So he was basically saying, my allegiance isn't to any particular place, it's to humanity as a whole.
Precisely. For Diogenes, true citizenship wasn't about geography. It was about living in a way that transcended those boundaries, setting an example for everyone, everywhere.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this citizen of the world idea could be pretty appealing. But did anyone else besides this barrel-dwelling dude actually buy into it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, the Stoics did. They were another philosophical group in ancient Greece, and they really took this cosmopolitanism idea and ran with it.
Ah, the Stoics, known for being all about reason and virtue.
Right, exactly.
What was their take on cosmopolitanism?
So they believed that the entire cosmos was like one giant, perfectly ordered city-state governed by reason.
So, think of it like the universe is one massive city, and we're all citizens.
Exactly. But instead of laws, we're bound by this universal reason.
So their idea of a good citizen wasn't about being a good Athenian or Spartan or whatever.
Yeah.
It was about being a good human, period.
Exactly.
But did this mean they thought you should just ditch all your local loyalties?
Not necessarily. So the Stoics understood that we can't help everyone equally,
Okay.
and that focusing on your own community could be the most effective way to serve the greater good.
So kind of like a think globally, act locally approach.
Precisely. But here's the key difference.
Yeah.
A true Stoic cosmopolitan wouldn't just blindly stick to their hometown.
Right.
They'd at least consider moving elsewhere if they could be of more service to humanity as a whole.
Yeah.
They weren't limited by borders in their desire to do good.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like, yeah, you can care about your neighborhood, but you shouldn't let that be the only thing you care about.
That's right.
So did this Stoic version of cosmopolitanism have any staying power?
Oh, absolutely.
Did it influence anyone?
It even caught on in ancient Rome, which is interesting because, Rome was this huge, powerful empire.
Yeah.
You'd think an empire wouldn't be too keen on ideas about global citizenship.
Yeah, empires are usually all about, we're number one, everyone else bow down.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but the Roman Stoics, they actually broadened the definition of citizen of the cosmos.
Okay, how so?
They said that all humans, just by being able to reason, were citizens.
Not just the perfectly virtuous folks.
Right. They also recognized that you could have local obligations and cosmopolitan ones at the same time.
So it's not like you have to pick one or the other. It's more like having different layers of responsibility, like being a parent, a friend, and a member of your community all at once.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that shared humanity connects us on a deeper level, and that connection comes with certain moral duties. It's not about erasing differences, it's about acknowledging them while still seeing ourselves as part of this larger human family.
All right, I'm with you so far. But here's something that's really tripping me up. Even early Christianity, which was often about belonging to this very specific religious community, seemed to have a cosmopolitan streak. How does that fit in?
It's true. Early Christians considered themselves citizens of two cities.
Okay.
There was the worldly city, which was their local community.
Right.
And then there was the heavenly city, a universal community of believers united by faith.
So, kind of like the Stoics, they were juggling multiple allegiances.
Exactly.
But for them, the ultimate loyalty was to God, not any earthly power.
That's right.
Okay.
And this focus on divine obligation meant that earthly politics weren't their top priority.
Okay.
So cosmopolitanism, while present, wasn't really the main event for centuries after Augustine, a major early Christian thinker.
It seems like the big power struggles between religious and secular authorities kind of push cosmopolitanism out of the spotlight for a while.
Right.
But it didn't disappear completely, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
These ideas have a way of resurfacing when you least expect them. And one of those moments was during the Enlightenment, a time of huge intellectual and social change.
All right.
Yeah.
I am definitely sensing a theme here.
Yeah.
So we've got cosmopolitanism popping up in ancient Greece, making its way to Rome, then kind of going underground for a bit, and then bam, it's back in the Enlightenment.
Exactly.
It's like this idea just keeps coming back no matter how much the world changes.
That's right.
It's almost like it's tapping into something fundamental about what it means to be human.
Right. And I think that's what makes it so interesting to study.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
So we've laid some groundwork here.
Yes.
We've talked about those ancient roots. Now I'm really curious to see how cosmopolitanism evolved and adapted during the Enlightenment.
Yeah.
Because we all know the Enlightenment was a time of radical ideas and big shifts in thinking.
Exactly.
So how did those Enlightenment thinkers grapple with this idea of being a citizen of the world?
Well, we'll have to dive into that in part 2.
All right, listeners, we're going to take a quick break. Be sure to stick around.
Yes.
We'll be right back with more on the fascinating history of cosmopolitanism.
Sounds good.
All right, so we left off with cosmopolitanism taking a bit of a backseat after the Roman Empire. But you're saying it made a comeback during the Enlightenment. What happened to bring those citizen of the world vibes back into style?
Well, picture Europe in the 1700s. Global trade is booming, empires are expanding,
Right.
people are exploring new lands, making crazy scientific discoveries. It was like the whole world was opening up and people were starting to think, hey, maybe we're all connected in ways we didn't realize before.
Yeah, like suddenly realizing your neighborhood is actually part of a much bigger city, and that city is part of a whole country, and so on. It kind of changes your perspective.
Exactly. Plus, the Enlightenment was all about reason and challenging old dogmas.
Yeah.
So people were questioning traditional ideas about authority, religion, and national identity.
Okay.
It was the perfect breeding ground for cosmopolitanism to make a comeback.
So was everyone running around calling themselves cosmopolitans during the Enlightenment? Or was it like the it word of the 1700s?
Not exactly. It wasn't always about formally subscribing to a theory. Think of it more as an attitude, a way of being in the world. Enlightenment cosmopolitans were open-minded,
Okay.
curious about other cultures,
Yeah.
and skeptical of blind allegiance to any single authority.
But didn't some people accuse cosmopolitans of being all about universal love in this vague, abstract way, but not really caring about actual individuals? Like, it's easy to say you love humanity, but harder to show up for your neighbor who needs help.
That's a common misconception.
Okay.
Many Enlightenment cosmopolitans saw things differently. They believed that recognizing our shared humanity could actually strengthen our connections to our own communities.
So it's not like you have to pick between loving humanity and loving your neighbor.
Exactly. It's like realizing that your family is part of a larger human family doesn't make you love them any less. It just adds another layer of meaning.
Okay, I can see how that could work. But speaking of big names from the Enlightenment, we can't talk about cosmopolitanism without talking about Immanuel Kant, right?
Yeah.
He was kind of a big deal.
Absolutely. Kant's ideas were hugely influential. He believed in this concept of a moral community made up of all rational beings.
Okay.
And this community, according to Kant, is bound by universal moral laws that come from reason itself.
So instead of each country having its own set of rules, Kant was saying there are basic moral principles that should apply to everyone, everywhere, like a universal code of conduct for humans.
Exactly. And this idea ties back to those Stoics we talked about earlier.
Right.
Remember how they saw the cosmos as a city-state governed by reason? Kant took that concept and focused more on the individual's moral duties within this universal community.
So for Kant, being a cosmopolitan wasn't just a nice sentiment. It actually meant you had to act a certain way based on
Okay.
these universal moral principles.
That's right. It was about more than just feeling connected to humanity. It was about living a life guided by reason and respect for all rational beings.
This is starting to get really interesting.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I'm a little lost when it comes to the political side of cosmopolitanism. Like, how do you actually put these ideas into practice when it comes to governing? Are we talking about world governments or...
Well, that's where things get really tricky. During the Enlightenment, there were some pretty radical cosmopolitans like Anacharsis Cloots.
Oh, yeah. What did he do?
He actually wanted to abolish all nation states
Wow.
and create a single world government.
Hold on. A world government. Isn't that a recipe for disaster? I mean, it's hard enough to get people to agree on things at a local level, let alone on a global scale.
You're not wrong to be skeptical.
Okay.
Governing a world as diverse as ours is a monumental challenge.
Right.
But Klutz believed that uniting humanity under one government was the only way to truly achieve peace and justice.
Okay, but how would that even work? Who would be in charge? How would you ensure everyone's voices are heard in such a massive system? I'm starting to think a barrel might be more appealing than dealing with that kind of bureaucracy.
Well, not all Enlightenment thinkers were as radical as Klutz.
Okay.
Kant, for example, had a more moderate view.
Okay.
He proposed a League of Nations, which sounds kind of familiar, right?
Yeah, wasn't there actually a League of Nations after World War I?
Exactly, although it didn't quite live up to Kant's vision.
Okay.
He imagined a voluntary association of states that would work together to maintain peace while respecting each state's sovereignty. It was about finding a balance between international cooperation and national self-determination.
So not a single world government, but a way for countries to work together without giving up their independence entirely.
Exactly.
That seems a bit more realistic, maybe.
Mm.
But it still raises the question of how you deal with those inevitable disagreements between nations with different values and priorities.
Yeah.
I don't know if Kant had an answer for that.
It's definitely not a simple solution.
Right.
And that's why cosmopolitanism continues to be such a challenging and debated topic.
Right.
But that's what makes it so fascinating.
All right, so we've gone from ancient Greece to the Enlightenment, and now I'm really curious. How do these ideas play out in the modern world? Do we still have different types of cosmopolitanism today?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, cosmopolitanism has become even more diverse and nuanced in the 21st century.
Well, don't leave me hanging. What are these modern flavors of cosmopolitanism? I'm ready for the next chapter of this cosmopolitan adventure. Okay, so we've made it from ancient Greece and Rome through the Enlightenment, and now I'm wondering how these ideas about cosmopolitanism are playing out in the world today. Is this just a fancy idea, or are people actually trying to live this citizen of the world life?
It's definitely more than just an idea. Cosmopolitanism is very much alive in the 21st century, and it takes a lot of different forms.
Give me some examples. How are people actually living out these cosmopolitan ideals?
Well, one of the clearest examples is the human rights movement. Think of groups like Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch. They're working to expose human rights abuses all over the world, advocating for victims, and trying to hold governments accountable.
So they're basically saying that there are certain basic rights that should apply to everyone, no matter where they live or what their government is like.
Yeah, exactly. They believe that all humans deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their nationality or any other difference.
So that's moral cosmopolitanism in action.
Exactly.
It's like taking those universal moral principles that Kant talked about and putting them into practice, fighting for a world where everyone's rights are protected.
Right. And it goes beyond just human rights. Think about global aid and development work. You have groups like Doctors Without Borders or Oxfam International, and they provide medical care, disaster relief, development assistance to people all over the world. They don't let borders or political differences stop them from helping people in need.
So it's like they're really living out that idea of considering the whole world your community, like the Stoics, being willing to go wherever they're most needed to help.
Precisely. They're all about global solidarity and responsibility. It's that idea of we're all part of the same family and we need to care for each other no matter where we were born.
So cosmopolitanism is not just some airy-fairy theory. It
Yeah.
can be a real force for good in the world.
Yeah.
But I'm also realizing that it's not always so easy to live up to these ideals.
Absolutely. There are definitely challenges. We've already talked about some of the political hurdles, like figuring out how to create global governing structures that are actually fair and effective, and how to balance respecting each country's independence with global cooperation.
Yeah, those are some big questions. Plus, there's the whole issue of human nature. I mean, we can talk about being citizens of the world, but people tend to care most about those closest to them, their families, their communities. It's tough to have that same level of care for people you've never met, who live in different countries, have different cultures.
Yeah, it's definitely a tension. I think the key is to find ways to connect those different levels of concern, like realizing that caring about your community doesn't have to conflict with caring about humanity. Those can actually reinforce each other.
So it's not about choosing one or the other, but finding ways to bridge those divides and create a sense of shared responsibility for everyone everywhere.
Exactly. And that's where those small, everyday acts of cosmopolitanism become really important. You don't have to be a politician or a humanitarian worker to make a difference. Even things like supporting fair trade, donating to international charities, or just being open-minded and curious about other cultures can help create a more just and connected world.
I like that. It makes me think that even though there are these huge challenges to deal with,
Hmm.
we can all still play a part in promoting those cosmopolitan values in our own lives.
Definitely. And I think that's a good note to end on. Cosmopolitanism isn't just for philosophers and politicians, it's for everyone. It's that call to recognize our shared humanity, expand our circles of concern beyond our own little bubble, and work toward a world where everyone can thrive.
This has been a fascinating conversation. We've covered so much ground from those barrel-rolling philosophers in ancient Greece to the big thinkers of the Enlightenment, and now to people working for change in the world today. It's really made me think about what it means to be a citizen of the world, in a world that often feels very divided.
It's been great exploring these ideas with you. Hopefully, our listeners are leaving this deep dive with a sense of wonder and inspiration, maybe even some hope for what's possible.
So listeners, if this conversation has sparked your curiosity, if you're feeling inspired to get involved or just have more conversations about global citizenship, we encourage you to do it. As we've learned, the world is complex and we're all connected, and we all have a part to play in building a better future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep those minds curious.